There was a small village known as Briar Rose. It was nestled between a large rocky mountain and a winding river that laced through the countryside. The town was enveloped in unimaginable beauty. The trees and cedar forests were lush, full of wildlife. The meadows were teeming with wildflowers and sweet grass that swayed in the gentle breeze, dancing its way toward the cobblestone streets. But Briar Rose wasn't a town of brightness or sunshine. Briar Rose was a town that was cloaked in a thick layer of fog nearly every day. Rain fell almost constantly, but the citizens of the town didn't mind. They loved the way the rain, tippy, tippy, tapped on their rooftops as they drank their evening tea by the crackling fire. They loved the way the rain stirred the earth alive and made the air smell so fresh and invigorating. In fact, the townspeople loved almost everything about the town, except for the strange fellow who lived in the castle in the woods. A dirt path led to his home through a dark cedar forest. The path twirled and curved its way up the cliffside, meandering alongside thousand-year-old trees and stones. The man who lived in the castle, Ichabod, was perhaps the most beautiful man anyone had ever seen. He had snow-white skin and jet-black hair that tumbled in waves over his sharp features. His eyes were a deep green, a green that mimicked the colour of the forest he often found himself hiding away in. About once every few months, Ichabod would come down to the village on a particularly rainy day. The villagers would all gawk and stare, nervous about the strange man's presence. Whispers danced through the town, carrying on them one rumour, and one rumour alone, that Ichabod was a vampire. Ichabod would avoid their eyes as he continued his journey through the rain, a journey that always ended at the local library. There, he would stroll inside and look around for hours, picking books off of shelves, running his long, thin fingers over the leather bindings and the smooth pages. He had a way of rustling the pages as he paged through them that filled the room with a steady, soothing rhythm, a k-k-k-k noise that seemed to rise into the air and stay there. The librarian Tessabel would sit at her desk and watch the man through her glasses. She was a well-admired figure in the community, the smartest person in the town, and equally useful when it came to knowledge of the farms, forests and carpentry. For years, her family had begged her to get married to a banker or business owner in the town, but Tessabel always refused. However, she could never tell her family that the handsome, pale man paging through her books was the reason she refused to look elsewhere. Over the years, Tessabel watched Ichabod with wonder and admiration as he opened each book. It was the way his eyes lit up, the way a smile tugged at the corner of his lips, that made Tessabel want to get closer to him. It made her want to know him, to understand the emotions that were welling inside him. She often tried to speak to Ichabod, but he was a man of few words. Even then, she could see the warmth in his eyes that made her want to get closer to him, no matter what the townspeople said. On one stormy day in October, the landscape was painted every colour of orange, brown, gold and fiery red as autumn swept across the countryside. There was a bite in the air, a reassurance that summer had come to an end. Jack-o'-lanterns adorned the streets, their orange glow coating the town in swathes of calming colours that put people at ease. Dried corn hung from every window and door, swaying in the breeze, reminding everyone that now was the time to harvest and hold loved ones dear. Rain fell over the town in a consistent drone so loud and steady that it seemed as if that was the only sound to be heard. Everyone was quiet, curled up by the fireside or tucked under warm wool sheets with a book. But Tessabel was at work. She poked the fire, sending embers buzzing into the air. She watched as they floated up near the bookshelves, alive and bright, and slowly began to fizzle as they neared the stone ground of her humble library. The wooden door creaking open behind her was the only thing that could draw her attention away from the beautiful sight. It was none other than Ichabod. The sight of him made her heart swell in a way that only young love can. She greeted him with a smile and a hello. She knew her face was flush with colour, perhaps the colour of a rose, but she didn't look down with embarrassment or try to suppress the authentic emotion. She simply gazed at Ichabod warmly. To her surprise, Ichabod smiled back at her and chimed in a charming tone. "Hello, Tessabel. It's lovely to see you." Tessabel smiled in delight. Him speaking her name may just have been the sweetest sound she had ever heard. "I don't believe you've ever spoken to me before, sir," she whispered in a honeyed tone. Ichabod chuckled. "I suppose I haven't. I just couldn't wait any longer." With those words, Ichabod turned to face the bookcase. Tessabel could see the slim silhouette of a smile on his lips. She returned to her desk by the fire, tapping her pencil against the edge of the desk, stealing glances at Ichabod every chance she got. Ichabod wandered from book to book over the next few hours. Sometimes he ran his finger along the book spines until he found just the right one. Other times he'd crouch next to the fire beside Tessabel, getting lost in the pages of a thick novel. He and Tessabel didn't exchange any words, and perhaps the most remarkable thing about that was that neither of them minded. They read their prose in content silence, only breaking their concentration to smile at each other on occasion. By the time night was beginning to fall, Ichabod approached her desk. His eyes shimmered with emotion as he handed her a stack of books. "I'd love to check these out, miss." Tessabel turned to her papers and noted the books he was taking. "You've made some wonderful choices here," she chimed, paging through the books in his pile. "They're the last books I have to read here. I've almost read the whole library," Ichabod replied. There was no pride in his words, no pretentious nature. Tessabel promised to order more books for Ichabod. He smiled at her with gratitude before slipping out into the storm. Tessabel watched from the foggy windowpane as he meandered down the cobblestone streets and entered the cedar forest in the distance. She couldn't help but imagine a life with Ichabod. Sure, she barely knew him, but there was something about him that drew her to him. The townspeople feared him because they believed him to be a vampire. But deep within herself, Tessabel knew he couldn't harm a soul. As she blew the fire out for the night, she couldn't help but notice a book on her desk. A Fateful Meeting, her favourite romance novel, and one of the books Ichabod meant to check out. Though the town would frown upon it, she knew in her heart she'd have to bring the book to Ichabod the next morning. When she awakened, the storm had grown even more impressive. Trees quivered in the autumn gale. Rain lashed at the ground consistently, the steady drone tapping over her tin roof. She pulled a warm wool cape over her shoulders and pulled her hair back in a simple silk bow. As she began the journey up through the cedar forest, she was taken aback by how astonishingly beautiful it all was. The fog was wrapped around the trees like a warm, thick blanket. Raindrops clung to willowy ferns, dripping down the leaves, as though they were descending a ladder. The air smelled of earth and forest and flora, an aroma that awakened and soothed her senses in the best way possible. At her feet, toads huddled under toadstools. Their eyes turned up to the edge of the mushrooms, watching as rain rolled off the slick caps and onto the mossy ground below. Though the storm was reaching its zenith, there was a sense of calm that could be found throughout the whole forest. As she continued on the journey, she held the book close to her chest. No one had ever gone to Ichabod's house before. She thought she should be nervous, afraid, unsure. But for some reason, she felt at peace. She felt as though she was meant to journey up this path, meant to finally confess her feelings to the mysterious man who she had dreamt about for all these years. Soon, the castle came into view. It was nestled between a rocky outcropping and a stunning open moor. The fog hung low on the moor, painting the wispy blades in thick dew. The already impressive castle was even more incredible up close. Moss and ivy clung to the stone walls, winding its way up to the crenel and merlon rooftop. Stained glass windows peppered the home, and the windows that weren't stained glass were aglow with flickering candlelight. For a moment, Tessabel stood in the rain and marvelled at them. The castle had a mysterious air about it, but that air only drew her in. As she approached the heavy wooden door, she took a deep breath. She could hear her knocks radiate throughout the home. Soon she could hear slow, smooth footsteps tap their way toward her. Ichabod opened the door with a smile. His black curls hung in front of his eyes, only making his green irises shine brighter. There was a slight smile on his lips, and the side of his face glistened in the glow of hundreds of candles. "I believe you forgot this, Ichabod," she said, handing him the book with a grin. Ichabod pulled the book against his chest. Only then did Tessabel notice his clothes. a billowy white button-up shirt that exposed his collarbones, and a pair of sleek black pants that hugged against his legs. No one in town dressed like that, and it certainly intrigued her. They hovered like that for a long moment, taking each other in without judgment or fear of judgment. Finally, Tess found the words spilling out of her mouth. "I'd like to know you, Ichabod." Ichabod's smile grew larger, but he turned his back slightly to her as he muttered, "You're the first townsperson to want that, Tess. Are you sure?" Tess didn't need to think. She simply nodded. Ichabod stepped closer to her, inches from her face. Their eyes met, and sparks seemed to fly around them as the world slowed down. "You're not afraid of me?" he asked. The words seemed weak and young, like a child asking a question they don't want the answer to. "I never have been." The words spilled from her lips, effortless and true. Ichabod's eyes softened as he took a step back, holding the door open for her. He invited her to spend the afternoon with him, and so their marvellous day together began. Tess was taken aback by the sheer beauty of the castle. The windows rose from floor to ceiling. As the rain fell, the shadow of each droplet reflected on the castle floor, creating a kind of moving mosaic unlike anything she had ever seen. In the entryway, a chandelier hung from the mahogany wood ceiling. It reflected the orange candlelight, casting the room in a warm glow that juxtaposed the cool grey of the outside. At the end of the room, a fireplace crackled with heavy wood logs. Sparks danced and flickered through the room, untethered and free. If you like this video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and watch this next video. I know you are going to love it.